Over 5 million people have left the UK in the past decade, and the trends show no sign of slowing down. People are leaving in large numbers every year, turning their backs on a city that once thrived as Europe's banking capital. But why is this happening? What's behind the wave of people and businesses leaving the UK, a country that was once a global magnet for talent and investment? Is this just a temporary shift, or is it a sign of a deeper, more permanent decline? Let's see what is driving this change, and why the UK is no longer the destination it once was. The United Kingdom, located off the northwestern coast of Europe, is made up of the island of Great Britain and part of the island of Ireland. It's surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean, the Irish Sea, the North Sea, and the English Channel. In fact, no matter where you are in the UK, you're never more than 70 miles from the coast. Despite being relatively small, the UK is home to the world's sixth largest economy, reflecting its history of economic strength. But now, the UK is facing a serious problem. Fewer people want to live there. Stagnant wages, high living costs, and fewer career opportunities are driving skilled workers to seek better prospects elsewhere. Many are leaving for places like the US, Canada, or Australia in search of higher salaries, shorter work hours, and lower taxes. The country's National Health Service, NHS, is feeling this strain more than most, with nearly 1/3 of doctors considering working abroad within the next year. Another 33% say they might leave at some point. They're motivated by feeling overworked and underpaid compared to their counterparts in other countries. The UK already faces a shortage of healthcare workers, with only 3.2 doctors for every 1,000 people, ranking it 25th among OECD countries and the lowest in Europe. If even more doctors leave, it could lead to a disaster for the NHS. But this problem isn't just limited to the healthcare sector. Even though the UK still attracts more migrants than it loses, those leaving tend to be more qualified. This is leading to a worrying trend of brain drain as more young professionals seek to build their careers elsewhere. As a result, by 2030, the UK could face a major shortage of highly skilled workers. So why is the UK no longer an attractive place to live? Over the years, the country's economy has shifted dramatically, moving away from industry to a service-based economy starting in the 1970s. Today, services make up a huge portion, around 80% of the UK's GDP. While this change seemed like progress, it has exposed a major flaw: low productivity growth. Productivity, or how efficiently goods and services are produced, is crucial for economic growth and living standards. But since the 2008 financial crisis, the UK's productivity has barely improved, averaging only 0.4% annually. This is far behind many other wealthy countries, and the productivity gap between the UK and places like France, Germany, and the US has grown significantly, costing the country £3,400 per person in lost output. Another issue is that most of the UK's service sector is concentrated in London. The capital generates 63% of the UK's surplus in services, which shows how important it is to the economy. Services thrive in cities that have highly educated populations, where businesses from similar industries are located together. Unfortunately, cities outside of London, like Manchester and Birmingham, have struggled to reinvent themselves as self-driven hubs. In fact, many of the largest cities outside of London have productivity rates below the national average. Moreover, investment in the country has been historically low. Since 1997, capital investment has averaged just 16% of GDP, the lowest among the G7 nations. This lack of investment has contributed to stagnating productivity and left the UK less prepared for economic challenges. The effects of low productivity are far-reaching, particularly when it comes to wages. From 1970 to 2007, wages grew steadily, but since the financial crisis, growth has almost stopped. Real wages fell below zero in the 2010s, only recovering pre-crisis levels in 2023. As a result, the average worker in the UK is earning £10,700 less per year than they would have if wages had continued to grow at the same rate. This kind of wage stagnation in a developed country is highly unusual and has led some to describe the UK as the poorest rich country, given its low median income compared to other wealthy nations. Income inequality is another long-standing issue in the UK. Since the 1980s, the gap between the rich and the poor has been widening, and today it's higher than any other major European country, except the US. Over the past 15 years, things have only gotten worse for many families. Those already struggling before the pandemic have seen their quality of life decline even further. And even as the economy recovered, the country's GDP per capita growth has been negative for 7 straight quarters. Projections suggest that it could be years before living standards improve. In fact, the average UK household is now 20% poorer than its German counterparts and 9% poorer than the French. The housing crisis is perhaps the most glaring issue facing the UK. Over the last few decades, the country has failed to build enough homes to keep up with the growing population. Between 1991 and 2021, 3 million fewer homes were built than in the previous 30 years, despite the population increasing by over 9 million. This massive shortage has pushed property prices to levels that many can no longer afford, contributing to widespread dissatisfaction. The effects of this housing supply-demand imbalance are clearly seen in London's soaring property prices, with the average cost of a home now exceeding £500,000. This makes owning a home nearly impossible for many young professionals. And it's not just a problem in London. Housing prices across the UK have risen sharply compared to income growth. This has caused the typical age for first-time homebuyers to increase to about 33, highlighting how challenging it has become for young people to buy their own homes. For those who can't afford to purchase, the rental market offers no relief either. With rental prices also increasing, many are stuck in a cycle where they can't save enough for a deposit, making it harder to ever get on the property ladder. This housing crisis is further underscored by the alarming rise in homelessness. From 2010 to 2023, the number of people living in temporary housing has more than doubled. In London, the problem is even worse, with more than 1 in 50 people experiencing homelessness. This number has jumped by more than 50% over the last decade. Adding to the crisis is the shrinking availability of social housing. Since 1980, there are now 1.4 million fewer social housing units in the UK, exacerbating the affordability crisis and increasing resilience on the private rental market. The housing crisis has created a growing divide in society, where access to affordable housing and wealth is increasingly dependent on family wealth or high salaries. More and more young adults are being forced to live with their parents because they can't afford to live independently. This trend reflects broader economic stagnation and falling living standards. But the housing issue is not the only challenge the UK faces. The NHS, once celebrated as a national treasure, is now fighting with a severe shortage of staff, threatening its ability to provide adequate care. With more than 110,000 vacancies across NHS trusts, the system is under immense strain. This shortage has placed additional pressure on existing workers, causing burnout and contributing to the growing crisis. The consequences are clear. There are delays in cancer diagnosis and treatments, putting patients at risk. Roughly 3 out of 10 NHS staff are contemplating leaving their jobs due to poor pay and working conditions. Even more concerning, 1/3 of UK medical students intend to leave the NHS within 2 years of graduation, either to practice abroad or to abandon medicine altogether. This mass exodus of healthcare professionals has already begun to affect the UK, with nearly 7,000 doctors applying for certificates to work overseas in 2022, many choosing countries like Australia, where the pay and working conditions are better. The loss of trained medical personnel is putting even more pressure on an already overstretched NHS. The NHS's staffing problems are also having a direct impact on its ability to meet essential targets. Only 64.1% of cancer patients are being treated within the recommended 62 days, a clear sign of systemic failures. Public trust in the NHS has also taken a hit, with just 27% of staff feeling they have the necessary resources to do their jobs effectively. This crisis is part of a wider issue affecting public services and infrastructure in the UK. As the country struggles with these problems, the lure of better opportunities abroad is growing for skilled professionals. With public services under pressure, Brexit has compounded these challenges. Brexit has had far-reaching consequences, worsening the UK's existing problems. The economic impact has been substantial, with projections suggesting the UK economy will be 4% smaller due to Brexit, equating to an annual loss of around £100 billion. This isn't just a theoretical loss. It translates into real declines in economic opportunities and living standards for ordinary citizens. One of the most noticeable impacts of Brexit has been a reduction in trade openness. Since the 2016 referendum, the UK has seen a 2.2% decrease in trade as a share of its GDP compared to pre-pandemic levels. This drop in trade has caused the UK to lose market share in both EU and non-EU goods markets. The impact of these disruptions is already being felt by workers, with real wages expected to fall by £470 annually by the end of the decade. The consequences of Brexit on the UK's scientific community are also concerning. The country is struggling to attract and retain top researchers, partly because of delays in rejoining the EU's Horizon Europe research program. This loss of expertise could have long-term effects on the UK's ability to innovate and remain competitive globally. The effect of Brexit on the UK workforce is especially visible among younger people. The number of young individuals considering leaving the UK has more than doubled since the Brexit referendum, rising from 13% in 2025 to 29% in recent years. This suggests that Brexit has altered young people's perception of future opportunities within the UK. At the same time, the number of EU nationals willing to work in the UK has sharply declined. This shortage of workers is being felt in sectors like healthcare and hospitality, where labor shortages are already affecting service quality. The UK is livable, but that's about as good as it gets. Looking ahead, the country faces a challenging future. With its economy struggling and public services under increasing pressure, the outlook for the coming years is concerning. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this.